rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to Monday's edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, we got a lot to get to, but I believe Governor Ron DeSantis has come up with a way to slay the giant. I'm talking about the Department of Education. I have not yet seen anyone else's plan, so I'm not saying that this is the only plan, but this, I believe, is an effective plan, and it harkens back to his day in Congress. He has come full circle. I want to talk about that because given what we're seeing with the gay pride parades and stuff like that, it is very important that we cut off the source of the craziness that is infecting our college and university school system, and that is affecting our K through 12 curriculum in the United States right now. I think Governor DeSantis so far may have the best plan. If I'm wrong, I will continue to research. I know there's others out there, Vivek Ramaswamy, that are talking about cutting off the Department of Education. I know Larry Elder has talked about it. I'm not sure of Trump's position on it. I will find that out, but I can tell you right now, as it stands, this is why Governor DeSantis is no joke. This isn't a guy that's he's not a frills and fluffy type guy, right? He's not going to be charismatic, and that matters in an election cycle. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, but that matters in an election cycle. But this is a guy that gets stuff done, and I think this plan is very important. This is why I want the debates. This is why I believe that iron sharpens iron, whether Trump is the nominee, whether it's DeSantis or someone else. This is a cause that needs to be taken up because we have to slay the Department of Education if we're going to defeat wokeness, if we're going to get our kids, make our kids smart again. That should be a slogan. So anyway, we will talk about that next on this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Oh, and New York City Pride participants walk around topless, chanting, "We're here, we're queer. We're coming for your children," as if we didn't already know that. So we've got some video for you that I want to share. So make sure you subscribe to our podcast wherever you go to find your podcast. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify. If you want to watch the video as well as hear the audio, obviously subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Carl Jackson Show on YouTube, the free speech platform where you don't have to worry about, we can throw virtually anything up there as long as it doesn't break the law. That is the free speech platform, I believe, rumble.com. So The Carl Jackson Show on Rumble. Please subscribe to those channels, rate and review them. Give us a 5, if you will. That's going to help us to move up the charts anywhere I'm at on social media at The Carl Jackson Show. All right, we're going to take a quick break for some program messaging, and we'll be right back. We'll go to this video right away, Gabe, when we get back. All right, we'll be back in just a sec. All right, I want you to take a close look at this video for those of you that are watching on YouTube and Rumble, because I've got some questions to ask after this. For those of you that are listening, it's hard to make out the celebration that you see. Topless women, men dressed like women and gays and just acting crazy. There's other videos out there where it gets totally crazy. Women are just topless. It's absolutely insane. So here's a question that I want to ask. Now, this was New York City's Pride Parade, where participants walked around literally saying, we're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children. We already knew that. Now, here's what you need to understand. These people don't understand that they're the useful idiots. The whole trans movement, the whole LGBTQ radical movement is a movement of psychological warfare. I will get into that a little later this week on one of the podcasts, and also on Officer Tatum's show this week. I'll be in for Mike Gallagher later this week as well. So I will get in deep to that. But here's what I want you to understand. These people are just the useful idiots, but we do need to fight back against this stuff. Look at that video. For those of you that saw that video, I want you to ask yourself, do you really believe that these are the people that understand what's best for your children more than you do as a parent? Are these people that you would trust with your children, being around your children in some type of confined setting? I would be scared that these people would molest or hurt my child or at the very least, like they're doing in schools, sexualize and try to brainwash my children. This is unacceptable, like no one's business. And notice this: these people are like kids. They throw a temper tantrum if they don't get their way. These are not the adults of society yet. These are the people that the Democratic left are bowing down to. Why? Because they're activists. They are activists. They talk a lot. They make a lot of noise, and they also donate. So when we stand up against them, or anyone stands up against them, they protest, they do whatever. The right isn't used to this, but we're growing accustomed to this. We're starting to fight back, but this movement is starting to hurt the left. This is waking a lot of people up. But yes, they're queer, they're here, and they're coming for your children, but they're also coming for you, quite frankly, because those that are in the radical left that want to impose this radical trans and LGBTQ agenda on you want to silence you. It isn't enough anymore just to be tolerant, to say, hey, listen, you believe what you believe, I'm going to believe what I believe. Those days are over. Now they're saying, not only are you going to believe what we believe, as in this LGBTQ radical communist movement, but you're going to celebrate it as well. And if you don't, we're going to silence you. We're going to censor you. We'll even beat you if we have to. So that's what you need to understand about that movement. Okay, moving on. All right, now, there's a story that I want to bring you. And before I do, let me just remind you guys, mypillow.com. All right, Michael and Dale, guys, listen, honestly, without sponsors, it is impossible to carry on with podcasts like this. So I need your help, and I'm going to help you out too. I'm going to make sure that you get a good night's sleep. All right. Go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square at the top of the page, and enter my name, Carl, Carl. Right now, again, Michael and Dale has this buy one, get one free. Buy one, get one free. All right. So I use the F word of the new MyPillow 2.0. You're going to absolutely love it. All right. It has the same patented adjustable feel as the original MyPillow, so you can move it around, swish it around any way you want for your comfort. But now it's even softer, it's smoother, and it's cooler because it has a temperature regulating thread. It comes with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. You cannot beat that with a bat. If you're unhappy with it, you can send it back, but I know you won't be unhappy with it. I know you will get a better night's rest, just like I do with the new MyPillow 2.0. All right, so make sure you give them a call, 800-858-0263. Tell them my name, Carl, 800-858-0263, or go to mypillow.com, click on that radio listener square at the top of the page, and enter my name, Carl. Now, here's another story that came out last week, and I didn't get to it. I know some opined on it, but it's important that I bring this up before I get into what Governor Ron DeSantis is doing. I like when these politicians come up with a plan. Governor Ron DeSantis is doing just that. So, hat tip, this was from Fox News, and it was released last week. 13-year-olds now lack the basic skills in reading and math as standardized test scores reach the lowest in years, according to U.S. data. So data from the federal standardized test scores points to another startling effect of the COVID lockdowns. All right, I'm not saying the pandemic, as Fox wrote, but the lockdowns are what caused this nonsense and the effects that it had on American children, with numbers now indicating that reading and math scores for the 13-year-olds dipped to their lowest rate in decades, showing no sign of they say pandemic, I'm saying lockdown recovery. Scores by the National Center for Education Statistics, also known as the nation's report card, released last week on Wednesday, indicated math scores have reached their lowest since 1990 when it comes to math, while reading scores dipped to the lowest since 2004. This is insane. This continues a downward trend since the pandemic began in 2020 and the subsequent lockdowns by a lot of these blue states. All right, now, he goes on to say that data indicated the students tested scored an average of 256 out of 500 in reading and 271 out of 500 in math, compared to 260 in reading and 280 in math just 3 years prior. So the numbers are trending downward. It isn't getting better. It's getting worse. And I believe, honestly, without being in school, Also, just the bombardment of social media and all this kind of stuff. Kids aren't reading books, are being told that books aren't important to read and all this kind of stuff. Kids today seem to only have like a 30-second time, period of time in which they can pay attention. It's insane. The New York Times did not acknowledge the startling message, indicating that or saying that students fell short on the tests that measures basic skills. No crap, Kremlock. And New York Times, I would say you're in part to blame for that because you were a part of the hyping up the pandemic lockdowns as well. The green shoots, this is from the National Center for Education Studies, the green shoots of academic recovery that we had hoped to see have not materialized as we continue to see worrisome signs about student achievement and well-being more than 2 years after most students return for in-person learning. She goes on to say, this is from Peggy G. Carr, again, of the National Center for Education Statistics. She goes on to say, furthermore, there are signs of risk for a generation of learners in the data we are releasing today and have released over the past year. We are observing steep drops in achievement, troubling shifts in reading habits and other factors that affect achievement, and rising mental health challenges alongside alarming changes in school climate. The mathematics decline for 13-year-olds was the single largest decline we have observed in the past half century. So in 50 years, according to this commissioner of the National Center for Education and Statistics, Peggy G. Carr, she goes on to say, she added that the lowest performing students received similar outcomes to students in the 1970s when the data collection began, adding that the reading score was lower than the data from the initial year of 1971. Wow. This is insane. Per the press release, the data looks at numbers collected between October and December of 2022 and continued the downward spiral witnessed during the 2019 school year. Numbers declined for both boys and girls as well for all racial demographics included in the study, but some racial demographics were said to have witnessed a steeper decline than others, particularly American Indian, Alaska Native students who saw a 20-point decline compared to a 6-point decline for white students. Insane. All right. So you don't think those lockdowns had an effect? You don't think they'll have an effect on the United States long term? All this woke nonsense that are in our schools as well? Well, there's somebody that is fighting back. Before I get to that, though, I do want to mention a couple of other news stories that are out there. Obviously, you guys know the story of, they're called the Wagner Group. I say Wagner because I'm an American, but people want to sound smart and say Wagner, like we speak, like they, like I'm Russian or something, and I'm absolutely not. But there's this paramilitary group called the Wagner Group, and these paramilitary groups, or this particular paramilitary group, this is a guy. It's run by a guy. I don't know how to pronounce his name, to be honest. I'm gonna butcher it. Evgeny Prigozhin or Prigozhin. I think it's Prigozhin. I think that's it. So I'll just call him Prigozhin. So this guy used to be a chef. He was a friend of Vladimir Putin when they were low-level people. When Vladimir Putin wasn't the president, this guy became the chef eventually to Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. He would cater a lot of their dinners, state dinners, so on, etc. This guy earned a lot of money, a buttload of money, catering dinners for the Kremlin. They gave him all types of government contracts and whatnot. And eventually, this guy turned into, over time, he started hiring old Russian officers to do, soldiers to do the dirt for the Kremlin. So the Kremlin could say, oh, no, that wasn't us to have a hands-off approach. So they went to Syria. They fought there. They were instrumental in the takeover, I believe, of Croatia. Was that? In 2014, was that Crimea in 2014. So these people are serious people. These are also part of the people that President Trump, 200 or plus soldiers that President Trump, while they were in Syria, killed. All right. So these people are no joke. But anyway, it says here, the Kremlin announced Saturday that it is dropping the criminal case against Prigozhin, the owner of Russia's feared Wagner military group, after Prigozhin accused Russia of attacking some of his forces in Ukraine and threatened to effectively overthrow Russia's Ministry of Defense in less than 24 hours. Prigozhin sent his forces from Ukraine into the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don, where they seized Russian military headquarters. You guys may have seen that over the weekend. And then his forces traveled hundreds of miles north on their way to Moscow. But on the way to Moscow, apparently they were only 100 miles out, there was an intervention by the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, to apparently stop the mutiny. So it stopped right in its tracks. I mean, a lot of this stuff sounds fishy to me. I don't know what to believe when it comes to anything involving Russia and Ukraine anymore. You know, I just believe that this stuff should have been stopped from the onset, and Biden didn't do that. Also, we weaken ourselves by turning off our spigots of oil and allowing Russia to become the oil supplier for people, not just the EU, but China. And stuff like that now. So it's absolutely insane. This stuff could have been avoided. People are saying that Putin and Russia are both weakened in this in the wake of this attempted coup. I really don't know that. I'm going to get more information. It's just like President Putin has cancer and he's set to die. You hear those stories. And then I hear other stories. The guy's perfectly fine. So who knows? These areas have a lot of propaganda going on for them. So that's just important to realize. Another story I think is important. Merrick Garland states that questioning the DOJ is an, quote, attack on an institution that is essential to American democracy. That is really scary to me. Honestly, the DOJ should be able to be questioned. And first off, the DOJ wasn't mentioned inside of the Constitution. So they should be able to be questioned. And the fact that he thinks that way tells me that this man is a wannabe dictator himself. He's grown fond of his position. He's grown fond of the power that he has or wields. It's absolutely scary and terrifying to me, frankly. And this is more evidence that we need to, at the very least, abolish the FBI. And we really need to hone in the DOJ in general. So that's just a very interesting statement from Merrick Garland, whose cricket is all get out as well. Anyway, all right. So let me get back to this. Especially finding out what we found out last week, right? With the Biden administration, with Hunter Biden getting that sweetheart deal, and some of the U.S. attorney in Delaware just sitting on the information. They knew the laptop was real. There were other criminal investigations going on that they stifled into Hunter Biden. They waited until after the election. Actually, they didn't even produce it after the election, quite frankly. But they didn't mention it before the election, despite knowing that the laptop was real, despite knowing that there was investigations into Hunter, and he was dirty as all get out. He was getting special favors all along because he was son of the president of the United States of America. So for this guy to say that, just absolutely disgusting. They need to impeach this fool. The Republican Party does, even if it doesn't go anywhere, frankly. Now, let's get to the man with the plan. That is Governor Ron DeSantis. All right. I guys, listen, I don't care where you are, if you're Trump, DeSantis, but what I'm going to do, and it seems like people are scared to do nowadays, is just bring you the truth. Right now, this guy seems to have the best news or the best plan out there when it comes to eliminating the Department of Education, or at least weakening their power big time. And these are the things that I fear Republicans and or conservatives are not paying attention to, because we're so fixated on get Trump. I mean, every headline is get Trump, get Trump, get Trump. And I'm not saying that's not important, because it is. But I think the left, part of the strategy of the left is to bombard us with Trump, so we don't pay attention to their policies and what they're doing to destroy the United States of America. So hat tip to The Blaze and Daniel Horowitz at Conservative Review, who has written this column entitled DeSantis Challenges the Premise of the College Accreditation Cartel. This is very, very important, and a very important way or clever way to go after the Department of Education. And if there's a better plan out there, I'd like to know about it. Feel free to message me on Facebook, on Instagram at The Carl Jackson Show, wherever I am on social media. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Getter, I'm on True Social, I'm on Facebook. All right. So you can message me there if you like. But nowhere in the Constitution is the federal government granted the power to get involved in, listen to this, local education issues. Nowhere in the Constitution. Very important. So the Department of Education doesn't have the authority to subject your state-based higher education institutions to accreditation by unelected bureaucrats that are carefully selected by accrediting organizations. So what Horowitz writes. So after years of putting up with this unconstitutional power grab, which allows left-wing NGOs, make no mistake about it, this is why our system is so freaking corrupt, to subtly push a particular agenda in exchange for accreditation. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is challenging the legal authority. He has had enough. This is very, very good news, because there's a lot of wars that we have to win. The threat of the DOJ, the threat of the Department of Education and the EPA, and all of these bureaucracies that the left are using to advance their agenda with no pushback and no accountability whatsoever. So finally, for years, people have been talking about, Republicans. We need to, even Ronald Reagan. I love Ronald Reagan, but all these Republicans that are over the years that have said we have to get rid of the Department of Education, no one has done a doggone thing about it. So you have this Governor Ron DeSantis that is doing something about it. And this is why I think it's so important to have a person like him up on the stage debating, because these are the issues that need to be pushed within the conservative movement. This Department of Education are brainwashing a lot of people. How many people in the video that you saw at the beginning of this podcast with the New York City Pride Parade saying we're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children? How many of those people were brainwashed in K through 12 education or through the college and university system, where before it was common sense that, listen, man, you don't take your perversion to the outside. You shouldn't be outside, women taking off their clothes, men, showing their genitalia and showing their genitalia, kids around and all this kind of stuff. Man, those people would have been jailed. They would have been rightfully called perverts, all right? And now, it's just, this is a lifestyle, accepted, pride, love, love is love, and all this kind of bull crap, all right? So anyway, that stuff wouldn't have been pushed, I believe, were it not for the Department of Education making this stuff or forcing this stuff down the throats of college and university students. And I think as those college and university students graduated from colleges and universities, state universities, so on, et cetera, they come into the classroom and they pervert your children. And that's exactly what we're seeing happening now. So thank God for Governor DeSantis. So last week, Thursday, Governor DeSantis and the Florida AG, Ashley Moody, announced a federal lawsuit against the Department of Education, thank God, for its unconstitutional delegation of authority to private accreditation groups that act as gatekeepers for what is considered legally acceptable, all right, universities. All right, so Horowitz writes that while this might appear at first glance to be more of a technical question of accreditation authority, it lies at the core of how woke ideology has permeated every major industry and profession. For those of you that I've heard some people, commentators say, even Kellyanne Conway, that woke isn't enough for Ron DeSantis to win the White House. And she's right. He's got to have some foreign policy experience. But she's also wrong, in my opinion, to minimize woke ideology and cultural Marxism, because politics flows downstream from culture. And this is what the left is using in order to fundamentally transform America. Silencing doctors, lawyers, which I'll get into in just a second. So I fear that the people like Kellyanne Conway don't realize how important this fight is on wokeism. And that is just nothing more than cultural Marxism being shoved down your throat in every single facet of life: entertainment, education, so on, etc. The left is using absolutely every institution at their disposal to fundamentally transform America and to invoke a new truth or new truths in society as they see fit. All right. And they will have to bow down to the woke left. We'll have to bow down to the woke government. Ron DeSantis is offering a plan to fight back against this. So the federal government has elevated professional and trade associations to the status of gatekeepers for college accreditation. In various ways, according to Horowitz, they use medical accreditation boards, which we know is true now, and the American Bar Association, and two of the most important professions to serve as legal bars to entry for competing ideas. All right. So this is how were they able to keep lawyers silent when it came to COVID? How come lawyers weren't saying, man, this is against the Constitution. We need to be suing. But besides the fact that these major pharmaceutical companies were given legal immunity, which was just absolute craziness. But anyway, they were given legal immunity in 2020 under Trump's Operation Warp Speed. All right. So, but doctors and lawyers had to shut their mouths, and they have to continue to shut their mouths. So any left-wing agenda that the left pushes that's contrary to science, that's contrary to the law, it doesn't matter. These doctors and lawyers coming out of these colleges and universities have to bow down to the woke mob. Otherwise, they won't be accredited. Horowitz goes on to say, by forcing specific accreditation associations down the throats of the state universities, the federal government ensures the indoctrination agenda flows to all 50 states while accompanying what? Federal subsidies and student loans. All right, so you don't get accredited. Schools don't get federal subsidies if they don't bow down to the woke mob. Student loans, you don't get a student loan if you don't take this particular course because you need to know how Queer Eye for the Straight Guy is important for your life. I mean, you know what I mean? This is just what they do. So $112 billion in federal education dollars flow based on the accreditation of a selected private monopoly that was created by the government. But this is unaccountable. These people are unaccountable to the population, to voters. They're unaccountable. So here's what DeSantis is doing. As such, pursuant to federal law, Florida's universities are forced to bow down to the whims of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges. They're called SACs, to attain legal legitimacy. Again, pursuant to the federal law, Florida's universities are forced to bow to the whims of the Southern Association of Colleges, they're known as SACs, and Schools Commission on College to attain legal legitimacy. So schools cannot attain legal legitimacy unless they accept the accreditation process of SACs. So recently, SACs, which is the anointed regional accreditor for the Southeast, threatened the University of North Carolina. Why did they threaten the University of North Carolina? You guys aren't going to believe it, but they threatened the University of North Carolina over its plan for a program focused on ideological diversity. So University of North Carolina was going to lose its accreditation process or get in trouble for it because they wanted to promote ideological diversity, not just skin color diversity. You know what I mean? Not just racial diversity, not just sexual diversity, but ideological diversity so that they could inform people, so that they could, teach people how to think critically. No, Sachs didn't want that. So DeSantis, realizing that Sachs was going to interfere in his desire to root out cultural Marxism, not just here in Florida, but I think this will have wide-spreading ramifications. He decided to sue the DOE on the grounds that the entire concept of regional accreditor gatekeepers run afoul of what's called the non-delegation doctrine. So this legal doctrine, according to Horowitz, holds that a legislature cannot delegate legal authority to private entities that are not subordinate to a government authority. Again, the legal doctrine holds that a legislature cannot delegate legal authority to private entities that are not subordinate to a governmental authority. So now, here's a quote from Ron DeSantis. He says, "You cannot take legislative power and delegate it to an unaccountable private body and let them administer that power without any type of checks and balances. So we believe it violates what's called the private non-delegation doctrine." All right. So the private non-delegation doctrine, he says, and we think that we're going to be right on it. So this is one of the things that I like about Governor Ron DeSantis. Listen, guys, this isn't going to be this isn't a cheerleader type guy. This isn't a warm and fuzzy type guy, but this is a guy that gets stuff done. And when he says he's going to do it, it isn't about scoring cool points. He does it. He does it. I think that's why so many people in Florida like him. That's the reason. All right. And then listen to this. If you're wondering how this nonsense got set into motion, who made matters worse? A guy by the name of President George W. Bush. I feel so duped by the Bush administration. Listen, I believe that people were put in power for such a time as this, but obviously we play a huge role in that, and I did when it came to George W. Bush. His first term. Listen, we were attacked. I don't know if it was right to go to. Let me take that back. Hindsight 2020. Was Iraq an effective war? I don't believe so. Did we go after some of the right people? Yes, but I think we could have punished them in different ways. Obviously, I think we learned that under President Trump. I think he, as far as foreign policy, performed much better than any modern day politician, since Reagan at least. So here's what happened. In 2008, Congress made these accreditors a fourth branch of the federal government in the mode of the Federal Reserve and similar agencies by prohibiting the department from, quote, promulgating any regulation with respect to the standards of an accreditation agencies or creating standards that accrediting agencies or associations shall use to assess any institution's success with respect to student achievement. How does that even make sense when it comes to education? Again, let me read that quote. So the Federal Reserve, the CFPB, and similar agencies. All right, let me just read this again. In 2008, Congress essentially made these accreditors a fourth branch of government, according to Horowitz, in the mode of the Federal Reserve. All right. And the CFPB and similar agencies by prohibiting the department from, quote, promulgating any regulation with respect to the standards of an accreditation agency or creating, listen to this, standards that accrediting agencies or associations shall use to assess any institution's success with respect to student achievement, close quote. It was part of the officious Higher Education Opportunity Act reauthorization that was promoted by George W. Bush. I don't know what to say. I guess that's part of that compassionate conservative argument, which I absolutely hate it. One of the dumbest things I've ever heard come out of a president's mouth. And listen, I think George W. Bush caught a lot of flack. Obviously, he's a smart man, a decent man. But when you look back at his presidency, there were a lot of failed opportunities. A lot of times he didn't fight back. He didn't push back against the left. And they totally destroyed his presidency by the second term, in my opinion. And then he goes and he does dumb stuff like this. So now, according to DeSantis, having private entities serve as gatekeepers for approval violates the appointments clause under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Any official wielding significant authority under law, such as approval for all education funds, should be subject to approval by the Senate. Forgive me, I'm having to read through some of this legalese. It's hard to just point it out or to blurt it out. But he's going after this thing in a legal manner. He's trying to weaken the Department of Education. He's trying to strengthen states. He wants states to have the power to determine what accreditation should mean, state legislatures, and I think that's a good idea. So here's what DeSantis believes and what he's done in Florida already. So he does believe, DeSantis does, that the Department of Education should be forced to recognize the legitimacy of a state university that's based on laws that are passed by the state legislature. All right. If we're going to be these laboratories, then we should have the right to do that. The state should have the right to do that. All right. In the case of Florida, the governor signed a law, that SB 7044 last year, that required half of Florida's public universities to change accreditors in the next 2 years to other regional organizations, so that Sachs doesn't have a monopoly in the Southeast or in Florida. This is powerful. He believes that in essence, Florida should even be able to create its own accreditation plan, which I love. And so long as the state recognizes it, the feds should do the same. And that's going to be far reaching. So the Department of Education, they came after Ron DeSantis for that because they don't want to lose their grips on power. They want to be able to dumb your kids down, as we saw earlier. So in July of 22, the Department of Education sent a letter to regional accreditors warning them that Florida's law violates the quote unquote accepted norm and undermines the voluntary nature of the relationship and the independent roles of the various actors in the triad relationship between accreditors, states, and the Department of Education. So Ron DeSantis wants to break that up. The department offered new guidance seeking to deter accreditors, listen to this, from playing ball with Florida in order to lock schools into permanent accreditation by Sachs. So a bunch of left-wing radicals, they want to have the last say. So if DeSantis' law succeeds, it'll be far-reaching because its success would affect in effect would free other states to do the same, to be freed from this monopoly of accreditation. And then we could see what schools, what states perform the best. Right now, Florida has the best educational programs in the entire nation. We didn't lock down our schools. We went back to school. Our children were sent right to school right away. Ron DeSantis has fought CRT, DEI in our schools. So this is a guy that deserves a lot of credit. And this isn't new for DeSantis. Apparently, he tried to do this. I didn't realize this. In 2015, he introduced legislation together at the time with Senator Mike Lee to allow states to develop their own accreditation systems, not just for colleges and universities, but also for apprenticeships, job training programs, and even individual courses in order to even the playing field with a higher education cartel. So this is what Governor DeSantis has done in Florida. I think this is very important. I think that whether it's DeSantis, whether it's Trump, this cause needs to be taken up. And this is what I fear, guys. We can't beat each other up so much and just focus on what the left is doing to destroy the country without coming up with our solutions to fix the country. And this is a solution to fix the country, which I love. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast, por favor. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Please remember on that Rumble and YouTube channel to rate and review us. Click the subscribe button. Click the subscribe button first. Rate and review us. All right. Give us a 5. That'll help us to move up the charts. And also, we're on all things social media at The Carl Jackson Show, Facebook, Twitter, Truth Social, Getter, Instagram at The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. And until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.